Denise and I would just like to, I'd like to start off with this it really is a fantastic pleasure to be part of this part of the plan, and I want to thank Louise and Bunny and Penny who organised it for including us. It's really quite special. We see it really as a celebration of Bunny and Louise's life, and it's wonderful to just participate in the fellowship of this part of the family.
In celebrating Bunny's life in particular, I would just like to remember that he carries the streak of the Cornishman with him, because he does tend to break the mold here and there. And if I think of that trip that you did with the kids when they were young, that was really breaking the mold. And it was a wonderful lesson to so many of us, because you had the guts to take the kids out of the conventional schooling and just disappear for a year. There are not many who do that. And I think what was so fantastic about that is that you chaps didn't miss a year, you just came back in the year that you would have been in anyway. And it just shows you that barefoot and all, they learned a few things across there. And I think that stood you in fantastic stead in the life that they had, because you all have got this entrepreneurial spirit and the spirit of breaking the mold, which I think is great. And so we really celebrate you, and it's wonderful to be part of a family, where there's trust, there's fun, there's love, there's hope, and it's great to be here. So thanks, chaps. Much appreciated. I just want to do a few things before we start.
And one thing is to pass on a family Bible, and we pass it on to Gary, and I'll just put it in here. It's passed on by Bill Carter, who was the oldest son of Frank, to Gary Carter, the oldest son of Randall, as Gary has been the flag bearer of the family Christian belief in the Cornish tradition, and I think that's very special. So, where's Gary? Gary. It's 80, I can't say 80 years old, because this was given to my parents at their marriage in Mowbray. Those guys who are going to UCT will see Mowbray Methodist Church. That's where they were married.
That's amazing.
So enjoy that.
Wow.
And then Denise and I just want to pass on just a little gift to each of the family. Two to Bunny and Louise, because it's really music from the mountains. And it's wonderful what music, I was speaking to Sally this morning, what music does to children's lives. And we're busy looking at it with a new program down the Berg, where, you can see it when they come into the choir school. A little Zulu boy will come in, age of 9. Within 6 months, he's speaking perfect English with good diction. He's doing the maths, he's doing everything. And music, the discipline of music is just fantastic. And so I'm going to give each of you one of the recordings from the Drops of Big Boys Choir. And I've added one for Bunny and Louise, which is entitled When We Were Young.
So you'll have a Drops of Big Boys Choir and When You Were Young. Right. It is an amazing school, because the boys who graduate from that school in grade 9 invariably get scholarships at the best schools. And I think of the Barlow brothers who went to St. Stithians, they were the sons of a domestic servant and a gardener. And those Barlow brothers went to the school, and they went on to St. Stithians. And all three of them are multimillionaires at 26. just incredible what music can do. You'll see that they sing in a lot of places. The Bala Brothers, Why Bala. I remember when we opened up Kenman, Zwei sang at the Braai that night, and he was then Standard 9. I mean, it was just fantastic, what music can do, and that was great. So I'll just hand these out as they come. So Joni and Tracy, that one for you. Connie and Louise, just thanks for memories. Craig and Heidi.
Well,
Enjoy.
you?
You put it into your car radio to go home.
Yeah.
Kenny and Kevin.
I've made it to
Okay, okay. When we were young.
When was that?
Simon. Yes, Simon.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Simon. And Sally. Anyway,
Thank you so much.
just enjoy music from the mountains. This was up. Let's see, it's gone. Yeah. If you go to Cornwall, you can find all sorts of memories of the Carter family. You know, that's rather nice little, that sort of thing. It gets a bit commercialised, but it's rather nice.
Yes.
And if you ever go there again, I'll get a whole lot. I wish I could have given you one each, but it really is quite nice. And I think the motto is success through adversity. And, I think that has a lot to say for it. And I suppose pirates must have, or smugglers must have experienced a lot of adversity. But I think that when we look at the Carter family, we should also look at the woman's side of things. So when you see the name Thorns, that was my mother's knee name. And then my grandmother on the Cornish side, our grandmother, was a Rowe, R-O-W-E. And then the grandmother on the Thorns side was a Spence. So Spence, they were all border people, my mother's side, our mother's side. And so they were called Geordies, right on the border of Scotland. And our uncle, who was killed in the First World War, was a Gordon Highlander as a result of the Spence connection. So we're not just Carters, we're Spence, Rose, and Thorns. I've got a little photograph here of this tombstone of my mother's parents and their eldest son who was killed in the war. And that's at the end of, if you ever go to Lake District, at the end of Windermere, the most beautiful lake. It's a very big lake in the Lake District. And there's a little chapel and a little graveyard right at the end of Windermere. And that's where they're buried. That's Joseph and his wife Nan. And the uncle after whom I was named was Joseph William. And he didn't like the name Joseph, so they called him Billy. So my name until I met Denise was Billy. And she changed it to Bill. Yeah. Okay. So the story begins, I suppose, with the smugglers. And Craig has already got a copy of this with Kriya off the Kindle. And this is the story of one of the smugglers. And I think that it makes good reading, a bit heavy at times because it goes from one crisis to the next. And at the beginning of the crisis, there's a lot of optimism and gung-ho, and it ends up on his knees pleading for forgiveness from God because he's now carried out another shot at another, or they've pinched something, or got something. And so it's a roller coaster ride, but amazingly entrepreneurial, and at the same time very well connected, because whenever he got into prison, he said the folks at home would be in contact with the Lords of the Admiralty and I'd be out within 7 days. So I think there was a lot of bribery and corruption going on there as well. But just amazing to think that it was the spirit amongst them. Now, Carter is not specially a Cornish word name. You would always tell a Cornish name by the TRE, Trevelyan or Tremaine. All the TREs are Cornish.
What does TRE stand for?
I don't know.
From.
Yeah.
Man.
Now, the Cornish by and large are short, very dark. My father always said that we had a touch of the Tarbrush, which was the Spanish Armada. A lot of after the Armada, they populated Ireland and the south of England. But we have quite a bit, I think, of that Spanish blood because, we don't get badly sunburnt and we're short. But interesting enough, our shortness comes from the woman, not the men. My grandfather was about Simon's height, so he was a good height. But my grandmother was very short, and our mother was very short. And so,
Were they not?
with Simon's brother. No, they're not. No, you're quite right. But
They made us all short.
they made short people, and yeah, so that's where we get that sort of shortness from. Our grandfather was a large family, five, and Funny Lees had 5 children, and they, the same mix in fact, 3 sons and 2 daughters, which you have, which is interesting. And he must have been quite a character. He was a Cornish wrestler. They came from an area of Helston, and he decided at quite an early age that he wanted to be a pharmacist.
Went to Paris. Paris was the sort of centre of pharmacy, I suppose.
Who are you talking about now first?
Bunny and my grandfather.
Your great-grandfather.
Your great grandfather. He brought the Carter family to South Africa. And I think times were tough after he qualified. He from Paris, he went to London, and then he caught a ship out to South Africa because South Africa had gold and diamonds, and he went to the gold fields. So he came out in 1898, and the Boer War then shortly after he arrived broke out, and he joined a company which was the big pharmaceutical manufacturer in those days called Lennon's. And he joined in Joburg, but he had to get down to Port Elizabeth because of the war. And he made his way from farm to farm, bought a few sort of trains which were favourable, and eventually got to Port Elizabeth, and that's where he made his home. And he became MD, and later on he was moved to Cape Town as chairman of Lennon's. And
Did you bring a wife with him from?
no, she came out later. I think she probably came out at about 2 years later, about 1900. But he had a great entrepreneurial spirit. But like all Cornishmen, he was very sorry about his sins, and he became a local preacher. And that was the great thing about Cornish, which was the founding. Cornwall was, at least Methodism was founded in Cornwall by Charles and John Wesley. Originally as the Wesleyan Church, it became Methodist Church, and it was really founded by the tin miners. And St. Stithians, of course, was the result of that, because the mining industry out here was manned by Cornishmen because of the tin mines. And so there was a very strong following, and Methodism here was established really by the tin miners. And Kingswood in Grahamstown, Kersney College, and St. Stithians are all Methodist schools founded by Methodists within the ambit of the church. So he was a great churchman, but he had this great entrepreneurial spirit. I was telling some of you earlier on that he was mayor of Port Elizabeth when one of the dukes came out, and he had a Cadillac, and he and my grandmother our grandmother opened up the road between Port Elizabeth and Cape Town. So they cut the ribbon on one side and cut the ribbon on the other side. And that's on the old Van Stolden's Pass Road, the one that goes deep into that gorge. Today there's this very fancy bridge across the top. But the one he opened was across the bottom, Van Stolden's Pass.
Well, you should explain to him about the picture you had going through the river.
Yeah, we'll come to that. So he was a man of great principle. Whether one agreed with the principle or not, I don't know. But I'm not sure what happened in Paris. Because, if he'd been a true smuggler, he would have enjoyed Paris. And then he turned to the ministry. And maybe things happened in Paris which made him very sorry for what he had done. I don't know. But he was also very emotional. Cornishmen are emotional, probably from the Spanish side. And he used to cry quite a lot when he preached. He would some tears would run down. And I never forget. I was chairman of the executive council at St. Stithians, and we got a new headmaster. And I was introducing the headmaster around to the various parts of the school, and we had a braai that night, and we had the staff members there. So I had to introduce the new headmaster to the staff members of the braai, and to ask Gary to say grace. Well, he gave us a wonderful sermon. It was fantastic. So it's really a chip off the old block, and I think in many ways. Your part of the Carter family has inherited more of the traits of the Carters that I knew than my own family. So Gary is just like Grandpa. He probably doesn't ring the belt out quite And I said to Craig the other day, I heard him say something, and I said, "Oh, that's awesome." I couldn't believe it. Just like we used to teach him maths. Yeah. So, that's interesting. So, yes, the other thing he did is that he'd seen the ravages of liquor. And, he was strong enough, amazing, but he was MD. He said, "I will not have a salesman who drinks." And
So you inherited that part.
It caused a huge stir in the company, because he wouldn't have salesmen who were going to sell his products, on the back of a beer. So that's the way he was.
And you must have been a rebel that forced the love of drinking into the family.
Well, just tell them what pictures they had when you crossed the river and
Yeah, I'll do that. But my father was a rebel. That's our father, was a rebel. He was a club man. He liked drinking, liked smoking, liked gambling. I never heard him about womanizing, but the other those three he did do.
This is faith.
And when my grandfather was dying, they called the kids. And my father went down, and as was his want, he would take a brandy bottle with him. And his favourite spot was to hide it behind the curtain. And he'd have his spot in the evenings. And when Grandpa was dying, he had a bit of pain, because in those days they couldn't control his prostate that well. And so he took the brandy bottle through and said to Grandpa, just have some of this to help you. Get the hell out of there. So he took it into the bathroom and took the label off, and because he was a...
I said hell.
Okay. Yeah, probably not. Well, no, he would say hell. Hell's in the pipe. You can say hell. And he washed that one off, and he put a medicinal label on. And he said, for medicinal purposes only. And the next day he took it through, and the old man had his last talk before he died. Then the folks got married. That's your grandparents, and they moved up to the Reef, and lived in Benoni. The place has produced many famous people. And then the 1930s came along and it was desperate. I mean, if you think that this was a depression, that was a really deep depression. There just was no work. And the war broke out. And so everyone, I think one's got to actually see it in the context. When you think that strange things happen to people, it's really in the context of poverty, of war, of threat. We had a mother who had highs and lows, and I think they just saw this war as an incredible opportunity of starting a new life with security in a way, because you could go into the army and get a salary. And so they both went to war, and we were shipped off to Port Elizabeth for 6 years. So that was a whole new experience within the Carter family. So I think that again, strength through diversity or through adversity. I think that there are different interpretations of what Bunny and I went through because we were different ages, and it affected us in different ways. But I think in many ways, adversity strengthens one, and you've made a success of your life, a huge success, and despite that earlier adversity, I think that that's an important lesson, that one can overcome adversity and turn it to positive things, because it probably make you more determined. I'll just tell you that Bunny, there's certain natural attributes many have. Some artistic, some
You knew every car number.
musical.
You knew every telephone.
Bunny at a
not
young
that long
age,
telephone
and
in
I mean, I'm
those days.
talking now,
But you always could remember numbers.
really about.
And he turned that into an expertise for stockbroking, which was fantastic. Because you have to remember numbers, I suppose. And so that was a natural attribute which he had. It was this huge affinity for numbers. And so the war came and went, and I think that there were various Carters. The Sicilians connection is very strong, and Michael has just matriculated at Sicilian. That's Alan the eldest, and
It brings to an end 52 years of constant Carter presence at St. Stithians. And we wanted to sort of celebrate
How
that
old is
later.
St. Stithians? How old is St.
53. Yeah.
It's good, that's ever since.
Well, 50, it's a bit more than that now, but it started in 53.
So the Carters were...
Well, Austin started very early. See, Stan Cricker, the second headmaster, was a personal friend of Austin. And Austin had been headmaster of the Cape School, and Stan invited him to come and join St. Stithians as head of maths. So that's where we're at. So between your family, Bun, and my family, and Austin's family, we've been there for 52 years. So it's now ended.
No one can afford it anymore.
We need some grandchildren.
Yes, Alan said, oh, yeah, some great-grandchildren now.
Right?
Well, the
That's
grandchildren.
next year, to carry on
Now
the...
people who can get us in
You're right,
Come on, Janet.
They were thinking of it, but now
You remember.
David good stuff. Said it's full of drugs now. That's it. That's Carter said, don't go near some stuff.
That's a good St. John's boy talking.
Yeah, look, they all have their ups and downs, and I think that St. John's is doing very well at the moment. It's wonderful. I
You
have a
won't
great
go there,
friend at
it's
St.
probably
John's as
St.
well.
Hawkins.
I was a school architect for
I'm
Stirling
staying
for
at
30
Dave.
years,
You're staying
and
at
I was
Dave,
for
that's
St. John's for 20 years. So, in fact, my firm still does all the St. John's work. Okay, Denise was talking about crossing the Foy River to get into Cornwall, yeah. And there's a pub called the King of Prussia. And John and Harry, which is in this book, called themselves the King of Prussia. Well, I think Harry called himself, it was John who called himself the King of Prussia. because as boys there was always war in sorting out of Europe, and the Prussian army was very strong, so he thought he was the king of Prussia. And that stuck, so you still get Prussia Cove. But the sort of pub is a national monument in England, and it's got a hanging outside. And John and Harry Carter on the one side, in their smuggler's garb, with their castle and all the rest of it. And on the other side, they've got their minister's garb.
So who was your great grandfather, Harry or John?
John.
So John is the
Yeah.
descendant.
So that's why John is very common in the. There's a whole lot of names. James comes up, John, and the Johns were normally called Jack. And then there's Francis. Francis was the father of John and Harry. And my father was Francis, and they called him Frank. That's where that came from. I was saying that Carter is not a Cornish name, and this little book tells you that they probably originally came from Shropshire, which is a great horse county. And of course they had made a lot of carts. And the carters were not cartiers, they were the manufacturers of carts. And you do get
Where's
quite...
Shropshire? Which part of England is Shropshire?
I'm not sure, I wanted to look it up. I think it's on the east side.
That's a long way from Cornwall.
No, it's not. It's up from Cornwall. Yeah, so on the other side, they started off in York, and my great-grandfather had a butcher's shop in the shadow of the York Minster, and that's where Alan's son is now studying, doing his major in English, his master's. And they then moved up to Durham, and Durham really was the hometown as they grew up. And from Durham they went across to the Lake District. And he was an estate manager, which meant he was a gardener really, but he managed estates for these very wealthy Englishmen. And he had an estate which he managed, I think on the shores of Lake Windermere. So that's where he was. And Bunny and I have got one cousin left in England now, and Betty. And the only time my mother ever went back to England was when I was 3, and she took me with her. And I'll never forget, Betty still remembers it too, because she was 7 years older than I was. And she had a little black dog. And at the age of 3, I decided this black dog was no good for her, so I drowned it in the tank outside.
Really? That's the pirate side of you.
Anyway, she still remembers at the age of 90. She still remembers.
You scored enough, man.
And then Benny butchered Barnaby and said,
Yeah.
"Don't give him traits."
No, you have to have him put down.
Okay, so I think that brief sort of story gives you our background, and I think certain character traits come through it.
So, Pixie never went back to England after that?
She went once.
No, she did. Only with me when I was 3, yeah.
The grandparents never saw them, they never saw their daughter again.
But you know,
What sisters were left there? The brother had been killed.
yeah, then there were 2 daughters,
so
2 sisters, yeah. One
Was
stayed in England.
Marge.
Marge, yeah.
And then she arrived out here.
She married a dentist here, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's Edith? How did she fit it?
Yeah, she was in those days, there weren't old-aged homes. Families were fairly big, and it was normally left to one of the daughters to take care of the parents in the old age. So she was the maiden aunt who stayed with her father, just to take care of him.
Was she Frank's sister?
She's Frank's sister now.
Oh, the one in 5?
Yeah. I think just in going through it, just thinking about your lives, I'm talking about the younger generation now, and the rate of change. I mentioned it a few times this weekend. To give you an idea, when Bunny and I were small and we were taken from Benoni down to PE to Holiday, the main road between Johannesburg and Port Elizabeth was partly dirt, many miles of dirt, mostly dirt, once you hit the Cape Province. And we used to have to open farm gates on the main road in PE, and just look at it today. You know. And when Denise and I got married in '57, there was no Jan Smuts or O.R. Tambo. There was a little airport out of Mitchfontein, which is on the way to Meyerton. And the air trips would take 3 days. So they would, there were 2 airports. The one was Vaal Dam, where they had flying boats, and they used to run a regular service on to the lakes, you know, Lake Nyasa, Lake Tanganyika, whatever, and go out to Africa that way. And so we decided we couldn't fly like that, so we took the boat. And we took the old boat train. And I mean, trains were a wonderful way of communication for us in those days. They were all steam trains. Denise used to travel up from Lorenzo Marx to Victoria on the school train. You used to get smut in your eye from all the steam and smoke, but it was a wonderful experience. And so the boat train would leave Joburg station, and we just got married, so we had all our friends there, and they were writing all these rude things on the train carriage, which I tried to wipe off in Bloemfontein when we got there without success. But it was very romantic because this boat train just went onto the quay in Cape Town. And there were trestle tables there, and you stepped from the train with your luggage, went straight through passport onto the boat. And you spent 2 weeks. Yeah, they were wonderful days. But again, just because you're all into technology, when I qualified, we used to draw on Irish linen, pure Irish linen, but it was a blue colour. And we used to draw in ink, and they had these pens, you know, these pens which do that. You can make them different thicknesses. And we used to take drops from a bottle and drop them into that, and then that's how we did all our drawings. And to make copies, we used to put them onto a timber frame, which was shaped like that with a bit of plastic. So you would put a bit of chemically coated paper down, and then you'd stretch the drawing over that, tie it down with a plastic sheet, clear plastic sheet. And then depending on the strength of the sun, you'd run outside, and the juniors would all do this, you see. And you'd leave for 30 seconds or 40 seconds or 60 seconds, depending on the strength of the sun. Bring it in, put it into an ammonia, we'd have a little source of ammonia at the bottom, put it into an ammonia box, and 3 minutes later you'd have a print, you see. And I mean, and when I left my office 10 years ago, and I was working with some London architects, to send them a copy, you press a button, you know, oops, and the copy would be in London a few seconds later. I mean, it's just incredible to see the growth of change.
And now you can print our house and
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's quite amazing. And I mean, that rate of growth is going to only accelerate. And so I think that to be able to cope with change is probably one of the most wonderful sort of, I think, gifts you can be given to cope with change.
They'll probably all be living on comics.
Well, I think of, you know, in Bunny's career, he changed careers many times, but each time it was a change. Well, you went from
For the better.
You went from a timber merchant to a bank to yeah.
firearm salesman.
Plastic perfume, that's what I think.
And made statues from Oxford for about 6 months.
Oh, that's right, you did that as well. Burnt your fingers a bit there, didn't you?
Oxford.
When you had that plastic modeling.
And Bill, you know the statue of David?
Yes.
You had to have a fig leaf in South Africa.
Yes, you're right. That's another change.
But we're just talking of technology. Dad started working in a company that did the first electronic analysis of chairs.
in the back there.
No, I remember that, EMS.
ESE.
ESE, sorry, yes, that's right.
Technology in the family.
Yeah. And then he was at the forefront of the credit card.
Yeah, that's what I said for him, so.
Yeah, so you'd change, you
He
changed.
used to be famous, man.
But for a photograph I had on TV.
Yeah. Oh.
There
Yeah,
was
so-
round screens, and
Yeah.
so he sat there waiting to be interviewed, and then took a photo and
And the
got
whole
sort of
photo
round,
is all round, yeah.
round face.
So I suppose at our stage of life we have our regrets, and I would say that my regret is that the two families didn't grow up closer together, which is a great pity, because I think you have a lot in common, and you know, whatever our parents did wrong, you know, something must have been right, because I think the families were right, and that's great.
Yeah, well put.
Um,
I just wish your dad had lived to be proud of his two sons. Well, he would have been so proud of the two of you.
yeah. Yeah.
How old was he when he died?
57. Yeah, these are just some. I've just brought these along because it's interesting to see what sort of likenesses you can see that maybe come out, you know. And these are just some photographs of my dad as a young man and in the army.
Who did you see, kid?
A young man in London.
I just want to read a few pages out of Harry's book, just to give you an idea. They'd been in prison, and he said, however, he was kept in different places until I think the latter end of November 1779. That's over 200 years ago, when we were privately exchanged by order of the Lords of Admiralty in the room of two French gentlemen sent to France in our room. In other words, they were swapped, as we do today. So they were in France and they were swapped with the two Englishmen. And then to come by the way of Ostend, being, as I well remember, about 500 miles. From thence came by the way of London, arrived at home on the 24th of December in the same year. We found the family all alive and well, but with the loss of the cutter, and the business not managed well at home as my brother was then a prisoner, and wanting from home about 2 years, the family was in a low state. Nevertheless, he being well respected with the Guernsey merchants, was offered credit with many of them. So went on again in freighting of large vessels and had very good speed for some time. That meant he was doing well. I went again in the little cutter I had before, about 50 tons. And after making 2 or 3 voyages to the King's Cove, went with a cargo on the coast of Wales. In order to smuggle it in, went on shore to sell it. Left the cutter to anchor near Mumbles, where information was given to an armed ship called the Three Brothers that lay some distance from there. And about that time there had been some large privateers cutters on that coast from Dunkirk, and had taken many prizes manned and commanded chiefly by Irishmen. My cutter was represented to be one of them, namely the Black Prince, mounting 16 guns and 60 men. I had then in the cutter about 6 men and 3 beside myself. When they saw the armed ship coming upon them, they cut the cable and went to sea. And when the ship gave up the chase from the cutter, sent his boats on shore, took up the cutter's cable and anchor and found me on shore. I, having left my commission on board and had nothing to show who or what I was, took me on board as a pirate, and after examining me in the cabin for 2 or 3 hours, detained me as a prisoner for 12 weeks, until I was cleared by my friends at the home through the Lords of the Admiralty. So after I was at home some time, riding about the country, getting freights, collecting money for the company, etc., we bought a cutter about 160 tons, with 19 guns. I went in her some time smuggling and had great success. We had a new lugger built, which amounted 20 guns, and both went in company together from Guernsey, smuggling along the coast, so that by this time I've begun to think something of myself again. Nevertheless, convictions never left me alone long together. But in the course of this time, being exposed to more company and sailors of all descriptions, I learned to swear at times. he was a smuggler, but he didn't like swearing. And once, after discharging our cargo, brought both vessels to an anchor in Newland Road, when we had an express sent to us from St. Ives of a large cutter, privateer from Dunkirk called the Black Prince, which had been on that coast and taken many prizes, to go out in pursuit of her. It was not a very agreeable business, notwithstanding, for fear to offend the collector. We put round both vessels into St. Ives Road, and after staying there for 2 or 3 days, the same cutter hove in sight on Christmas Day in the morning. We, not having our proper crews on board, collected a few men together and went to sea in pursuit of him. Soon come up with him, so that after a running fight for 3 or 4 hours, we not being half manned and the sea very big, the shot so uncertain, the lugger received a shot that was obliged to bear up, and in the course of less than an hour after I received a shot that carded my jib and another in the hull, that we could hardly keep her free, so that we bore up after the lugger, not knowing what was the matter of her running away. We came up with her about 5 in the evening. Desired, that means we ordered the captain to quit her. But he, in hope to put her into Padstow, continued pumping and bailing until about 6, when he hailed me saying, "Stand by," he was going to quit her. So that they hoisted out their boat. But the sea being so big and men being so confused, filled with water, so that they could not free her any more. I got my boat out in the meantime, sent her alongside the lugger, so that some of the men jumped overboard and my boat picked them up, and immediately the lugger went down. I hove to on the lugger and laid to her that she drifted right over the place that the lugger went down. So that some of the men got on board by virtue of ropes hove from the cutter, some got hold of the jib tack, and some picked up by the cutter's boat. So that we saved alive 17 men and 14 drowned. As Providence would have it, was about the full of the moon, or certainly all must be lost. This was a scene indeed. What cries, what screeches, what confusion. We saved some time there cruising about the place, but soon obliged to get the cutter under a double-reefed trysail, a heavy gale of wind ensuing, and bore up for the Mumbles. Now I'm going to inform you of a little more of my pride and vanity. The spirit of truth had not yet forgot to strive with me. Before we come up with the privateer and expecting to come to an engagement, oh, what horror was upon my mind for fear of death, as I know I must come to judgment sure and certain. Anyway, it's
How did they suddenly find God from being pirates?
well, because Wesley came, you see.
They met him, or he preached.
Yeah, he preached in
He
Cornwall.
was preaching to the coal mines of country to top of Cornwall.
Yeah, anyway.
And they came down and
Yeah. I just want to pass this around, and you can look at it in your own time. I think that you'll find this quite interesting. Yeah, he was quite a good-looking guy. This was I'll pass this around. This is Jack, John Howell. Jage.
What's your relationship with him?
He was our grandfather. This is a shot of him in Paris. That is him again. And I don't know who that was, but yeah, this is John Carter. That was actually our great-grandfather.
Jack's father.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, John and we just explained that John and Harry Carter, who lived or worked around 1800, time of the French Revolution. One of them had 6 or 7 sons. I think it was 7. And number 6 went down to the south of England, near Southampton, around that way. And the others all stayed in Cornwall and went on with their smoking and whatever. And Jimmy Carter in America came from the south of England, from that same family. Yeah, and in fact, Bill's been photographed by someone with Harry Carter and Jimmy Carter and our other boys, and there's a different resemblance, and even in the work and speech making.
Well, you see, he's also a house builder. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know that, Gary, that Jimmy Carter was building in KZN. Yeah. In fact, he was one of the group that's starting Housing for Humanity. Yeah. And I've got a signed book. I told you I've got a signed book from him. Yeah. Anyway, this is the same grandfather, and that's John Carter. And that's John again, and these are his three sisters. I know one of them was Esther. They don't give the other names, but certainly Austin knew Esther. I don't know whether Dad knew. Yeah, unfortunately, the women aren't as good looking as the men in this family.
Until this generation.
I was going to say that. Thanks, Gary. Until this generation. That was the impact of women from outside. But this was our great grandfather, and there's some. Yes, we are descendants of Esther. So the name was Esther, and I think that it's Esther Randall. So that's where the Randall came from. So I took my names from my mother's side. Bunny got the names from the Carter side. And so one of these three is here is Esther. This is Eliza, a sister who died early. Then these were the various shops they owned. They were all shop. The Englishmen were great shopkeepers.
They also had farms somewhere on the...
Yeah, this is our great grandfather. What was of interest is
Where did you get that book from?
I'm not sure. I must have got it from somewhere. That's him again, and that's our grandmother when she was younger.
It was a smuggler.
But clearly, J.H. was very much into France, because you get pictures of the French presidents and so on here. And that's J.H. again.
What's J.H.?
John Howell, that's Jack. I want Sean to look at this. Sean, he's got exactly the same beard cut as you've got. And this is the three generations together. That's our grandfather, our great-grandfather, and our father's elder brother, Clifford. Yeah. And I've got a picture of our father in exactly the same pose as his father. I had one of the Randalls, and I must just find that. Let's pass that around. You just look at it in your own time.
I'm going to wait to look at my glasses.
Sally and Penny, I think that you'd be interested in this, because that is your grandmother, our mother, sitting on there with her mother, sitting on the station at Windermere, and we've got a photograph of that, and at the back it says "Leaving for Africa."
Who's that?
wow.
That's Pixie on the left, yeah.
And then she only went back and saw mum one more time.
Yeah.
Poor mother.
And the mother's name was Nan. You see, you look at what time That's a Sally. Actually, she's across between you and Sally.
Didn't you like the shoes, Luke? It doesn't look like her at all. I know, it doesn't look like I remember
So that's the great grandfather, our mother's father, and he was the guy who was a gardener come estate manager, but he loved plants, and he had a collection of butterflies. He was very well known
as such. And this is our father. He was opening an art exhibition.
Hey, Grandpa looks so much like
He's got a hipster cut.
Yeah, this was the above rough. I don't know, Gary, whether you can recognise it, but
Pressure coat.
that pressure code is down there. Yeah,
That's the house that you want to paint.
that's it's very rugged. This is one of I think that was Esther. At least that was our grandmother. I never really knew her well because, well, funny didn't either, because she was very ill when we stayed with her. So it's the same shot of my. It looks as if the hairstyle is a bit like it is today.
So who's that?
That's Dad on the left,
Okay.
and that was a chap called Van Eerden, Dr. Van Eerden. He was. Yeah, that's my mother. That's when she was nursing in London. That's when my father met her. A little bit overweight, but
funny, and she was always so small.
yeah,
So poor old auntie never features, does she? And she did all the
yeah, hard work.
work.
I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
Say no.
Auntie Eve, sorry.
Yeah, that's one of the homes in Cornwall, which is quite a substantial home. Yeah, maybe she looks a bit like Georgia. There was another one of the homes in one of the villages.
She's just finished writing the text.
Same as Sammy. She born a year before that.
Yeah, that was.
Carrie Street too.
Yeah, you see, you hardly ever saw a photograph of Dad's dollar cigarette. Yeah. So that's myself.
And he always had his walking stick with him.
Oh, shame. No, that was
Where were you going to school?
to Grey.
Was that boarding school then?
No, when I was my parents. And then I mentioned to you, Austin used to run these special service mission programs on the beach, and this was an old Karoo farmer. This I'd like to just stay with for a while. This is a shot. I think this was the Cadillac, and that's our dad. That's his elder brother Clifford. That's Austin, and that's Edith, and that's Grandpa, and my mom must be somewhere here. That's one of our aunts, and this was taken at the beach at where was it now? Squin outside PE, which was
Where is Austin? Is this in there?
yeah,
That way.
yeah,
Pops.
yeah, it's Pops, yeah.
The baby.
And our dad is on the right.
Yeah.
But you can see the the model cars.
So Gary called his firm after that. What are you with Jack Shack?
Jack Systems, yeah.
Jack Systems. And what is wrong
Austin's
with
baggy
What is
pants.
Jack in yours from?
So I'll tell you a story about Austin's baggy pants. Remember we
You see up there, eh? You have Dax with the name of a maker of grey pants. And he used to have these baggy pants and they called him Dax.
And then Sydney was also called Dax. And
Sydney,
First Sydney,
laugh at his back.
First Sydney and then me.
Oh, were you called Dax as well?
Arthur, yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, Arthur. That's why the company's called Dax.
Yeah. Yeah, they were great on picnics.
With nothing else to do then, eh? No nice TV to watch.
Yeah. Well, I think we were touched by the Angolan War to a degree, but nothing like this war. Because you had this whole family was just. Yeah, that was a shot taken on outside Craddock, on Captain Stevens's farm. It's still there.
So is that funny there?
Yeah. Can you go back?
Go back, please.
Amy did.
That was one of the old farm buildings.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how to get that now. That's the great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Yeah. I mean, that's a substantial home, eh?
Whose home was that?
John's home. But you know, they had these huge fluctuating fortunes. I mean, by any standards, that's a...
That's what it was.
Hang on now. That's Randall. That's Captain Randall.
Captain Randall.
Oh, there you are, Bunny.
Once again, like Sean, you see.
Did he marry?
Is he married?
No, his daughter.
His daughter
No, his daughter
married a Carter.
married a Carter, yeah.
What era are we talking about?
Yeah, this would be before my about my great-grandfather. That's when it came in. There was the Randalls married into the Carter family. And they were sort of, not quite noblemen, but sort of,
Aristocracy.
yeah, it was sort of, well, you can see he had a cut about him. You know, with today's photography, yeah, if you'd like copies, we can have copies made.
Go now. It's over.
That was another one of the farmhouses.
Because they're all slideshows. This is 21.
You can see the typical
Oh, look at that.
Cornish hedge, you know, it was always built of stone.
A huge house and such a small gate.
This is,
Is it?
it's also a Randall. I'm not sure it's the same Randall, but he's a Randall as well. But you can see he got a very fancy waistcoat and...
Like those older films.
No, but Ponchie and Mary Pirate.
No, I don't know whether these were the nations from there.
They're definitely not the Carters.
Or a woman.
I don't do that. This was Opar Douglas, the farmer. He told me I was going to be a great preacher, and I let him down.
Is that you, Bill?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't do too badly, Bill.
And that's Mom when she was a captain.
Captain
Very
Pixie.
pretty.
So, Granny Carter.
And Sally.
Do you remember her, Chas?
Yeah.
The wide eyes.
And that's in the Mowbray Church. You can still see it in Cape Town today. Exactly the same doors, everything.
Who's that Pixie and your
Yeah.
dad?
So sad that her parents weren't in for the wedding. Hey?
That's a funny thing, huh?
How many people?
Yeah, that's a picture of my dad when he was courting Mom, and it's very similar to the one taken of his father. So now we're moving into the French part. That we won't go through that, but that's Denise and that's Andre Claire. He was a lawyer and then he became an educational missionary. Yeah, and so when we go to Switzerland, we see their progeny, which is also a very big family.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the old home. Denise and I stayed here. This window is a national monument in Switzerland, but it's when we stayed there in '57, there was a long drop in the back of the garden, and the bath was a tub in the kitchen. But that was Denise's great who went to Russia. She was in the court of Russia. Yeah. Anyway. That was Denise's grandparents.
Yeah, it's a photograph.
The women in her family.
Yeah.
How
Yes.
did they take those pictures to tell Lucy? They
That's,
came out wrong.
That's Denise's he was a minister in a village in Switzerland.
And is that you?
No, that's Denise.
The baby?
Denise.
Yeah, I mean, Denise.
Yeah. And this is and he wrote stories. He's also a writer. And that's Denise. That's Denise and her brother.
Yeah.
That's Etienne. Sorry, this was in. Now that was a dress which the Bushcrafts were medical people in the court of Russia, and that was in Russia. And Francois, her sister, was wearing that dress, and that's the parents when they were young.
All right, we want to see Bill and Denise when you were young.
Yeah, I want to see your
No, nothing like that. Sorry, that's just Denise.
That's your.
Well, this is Antoinette,
Yeah, I remember.
and
Françoise.
Francoise and Denise and Etienne, yeah. All right, those are the three sisters in later life, yeah.
Wait, which one is Denise?
Middle. Quite a bit recent.
I don't know what occasion that was, Denise.
It was in colour to start with.
That's about parents.
This is lovely, Bill. Yeah.
Oh.
We still haven't seen Bill and Denise yet.
No, not.
On your wedding.
Yeah, in those days.
They were in fact.
I mean, just tell you that when Denise and I got married, there was no money, and the reason Bunny can tell you their story, but Denise got up at 5 in the morning of our marriage to buy the flowers at the market and to arrange the flowers for her own wedding. She made her own wedding dress.
Yeah. Really? And then you're on the train that very night.
We were trained that night.
You must have been exhausted first night.
What are they? Taken
Fine
to the
tradition.
station and put on.
Sounds like a wonderful tradition.
Okay.
Oh, that's great.